Our final talk, Salutogenic Spaces, Designing Workplaces That Thrive, takes a look at salutogenic design and how it's changing the game for wellness in the workplace. I'm presented by Jill Stewart, president of Office Revolution, and Kelly Cullen, founder, coach, educator, and author of Life Interrupted, Eledex Consulting. Jill Stewart is a contract furniture industry leader with more than 25 years of experience across operations, design, and sales. As president of Office Revolution, she focuses on high-performing operational teams to fully support client needs. Can you tell it's been the end of a long day? I'm losing my words here. Kelly Cullen, also known as the Neurospicy Professor, is an executive function and ADHD coach, educator, author, and neurodiversity advocate. Through her coaching, consulting, and academic work, she helps individuals, schools, and organizations create more neuro-inclusive environments by translating neuroscience into practical, human-centered design strategies that support learning, focus, and well-being. So let's give them a warm welcome.
Yeah, it's good. All the tools. Thank you, Sophie. Thank you. So first and foremost, it's the end of the day, but Sophie nailed salutogenic. I was out last night, and I had a lot of people say, salute, Wegovy. I'm like, it is not a GLP-1. It is not. So as we sit here today, surrounded by beautiful things, right? When it comes to us as either a designer or a furniture specifier or someone that just procures, the question that we have to ask ourselves is, it was largely predicated by a budget. But what drove that budget was a specification. And largely by the time we get it, it is about an aesthetic. What usually isn't considered is the human. And when you look at that, and you look at, I'm looking at Rex Miller here in his talk earlier, what everyone before us talked about that is so prevalent today is the human being. And the human being is not considered, yet the human is the number one cost between salary and benefit. So imagine a place where the human meets the physical space through furniture. It is the one thing that human beings engage with in every space. So as you take a moment to consider that, you're going to consider whether you feel good right now, it's too loud, what is the environment like? If there was only a framework that tied in human performance, salutogenic, with your whole body, which is what we're about to talk about, which is whole body design. So enter in Kelly Cullen, who I have had the honor of working with for years, to talk about where does furniture come into that? Because usually we talk about it in the last mile. It's the last thing that goes in, it's the last thing that gets budget. Yet it is the number one thing that if there is furniture in the space will guarantee whether you physically embrace that space or not, tied to the other factors. So Kelly is going to take a moment, or two or three, to talk about whole body design.
Before we get into whole body design, thank you everyone for showing up. I know it's the end of the day and everyone probably had lots of places that they wanted to go, but where are we? Okay, so before we get there, I want to stop for a second. Show of hands, how many of you know what salutogenic design is? Okay, so we got a few in the room. It is a complicated framework, so I'm going to put it sort of in simple terms. Salutogenic design is essentially a design approach that asks us as stewards of the built environment to consider not necessarily just how we prevent harm in what we design and create, but more importantly, how can we create and design conditions that'll actually help human beings stay healthy, thrive, focus, have better well-being overall. So if we think about the workplaces that we're in, as Jill mentioned, most of our workplaces are designed by specification, requirements, or performance metrics. Rarely are we designing spaces for human beings. So what those conditions might be. If we think about all the beautiful spaces that we've been in or that we've designed, and let's face it, we all have, our spaces are aesthetically pleasing, beautiful, most of them more technologically advanced than we have ever had before, and yet our occupants are largely dysregulated, often burnt out, unfocused, and not able to interact with that environment in the way in which we've designed that. So most people will say, well, why is that? And I would argue that salutogenic design and whole body framework that we'll get to asks us to consider a different question. What if the environment is causing people, human beings, brains and bodies to be unable to function in that environment the way in which we designed it? And it's not necessarily just the fact that someone's not coming to the office or they don't want to be there, right? It's not about how do we get them there, how do we earn the commute? Those are questions, but really the fundamental question is, what if the environment itself, despite how beautiful it is, despite how aesthetically pleasing it is, what if that is what is causing the humans in it to not be able to function the way their brains and bodies need to? Okay. So, in order to, we're right at whole body design. Do we go right? You're moving me along. Oh my God. Well, you have to go back though. I know. I know. So before we get to whole body design, if we think about inclusive design and sort of the different frameworks that we have, starting with ADA, think about these different frameworks that you see on the screen like an accordion. ADA was designed, we still use it today, as a constriction. It's designed for a specific set user group, usually around access. Right? And so we went very kind of condensed and constricted. Then we moved to universal design, which was largely an attempt to course correct and ensure that we kind of bridge or blow out that accordion a little bit further to say, how do we design these environments that are going to be more holistically available to the largest number of people? Then we hear, and we still hear, neuro-inclusion, neuro-inclusive design. While all of these are very important frameworks, it, again, brought that constriction back. And now we're looking at a very specific set of user groups and conditions. What none of these frameworks do are integrate them all in together into one holistic framework that puts the human being at the center of all design and construction considerations. And that is whole body design. See? That's good. All right. So, whole body design as a framework sits on essentially these core principles, these 6 core principles. So it's asking us to consider them, think of it like a toolbox, whole body design like a toolbox. And these different principles are like the keys that unlock the toolbox. So if we think about predictability and choice, why is that important to a human being? Clear spatial cues, understanding wayfinding. These are all things that are going to reduce cognitive load. Having a lot of autonomy and choice inside of a physical space allows human beings to have a greater sense of control. These are not new concepts. We've all heard them before. Participation and life cycle. We are human beings, so our environments are dynamic. We're dynamic. We need to be able to adapt, or our environments need to be able to adapt as we adapt. So as we age, as we grow, if we get ill, if we are healthy again, our environments largely need to be able to support human beings as they evolve over time. Cognitive accessibility. So this principle matters because essentially all forms of input, doesn't matter what it is, sound, light, texture, you can pick your poison. All of them have to be clear, understandable, and reinforced. Again, this reduces cognitive load and allows human brains and bodies to be able to function in that space. Sensory modulation, we hear a lot about this. This is where furniture comes in. This is where textiles comes in, my brain. So sensory modulation is our brain's ability, you hear sensory inclusive design? Anybody hear that term before? So this is where that comes into play. So balance is the goal here. It is not one end or another. So it's being able to balance the needs of the human body through sensory inputs to be able to provide an environment that allows the brain and body to be regulated. Physiological comfort, this is your building science. So any construction, real estate folks in the room, this is your building science. This is your HVAC, this is your air exchanges per hour, this is the built environment chemistry that will allow individuals to be able to leverage and utilize the space as we design. And then lastly is psychological safety, psychological comfort. This is your fight, flight, freeze response. If you do not feel like you belong, that you're comfortable in your space, it doesn't matter how beautiful anything else is, that person is not going to be able to access or navigate that environment. These principles, they're not abstract. They're very specific. We've all heard them before. We've probably taken trainings on them. But when you look at it from a whole body design and what the human brain and body need and apply that lens over them, they start to take a little bit of a shift in perspective. I know, you're doing good. So how do we do that? How do we take those principles and understand what does that mean to the brain and body? I'll say it 1,000 times, brain and body, brain and body. We all, as human beings, it does not matter whether whether you are a male, female, they, that, it doesn't matter. We all have these specific systems within our physical human bodies. So if we think about the skeletal system, when you're designing and making design choices around, say, ADA, that is you designing, your team's designing and making choices around the skeletal system. That's access. How are people moving through that space? If we think about the circulatory system, this is where, again, building science comes in. What are the smells like? What are the air exchanges like? What are those decisions when you are engineering and putting those specifications in? What are those decisions? How many air exchanges per hour? What is that doing to the human body from a circulatory perspective? If somebody has asthma, how does that play into the decisions that you are making within that? The nervous system. We've heard a lot about this. So if you are dysregulated, if you have anxiety, if you have any sort of cognitive or sensory consideration, any design decisions, that's sensory inclusive design, that's neuro inclusive design, that's going to sit and support that specific system of the human body. Then we have the limbic system. That's your fight, flight, freeze. We've all been there. Walk into a room, you can't see around the corner, path of egress isn't clear, your back towards the door. How many people love to sit with their back towards the door? That feels great, right? That's your limbic system. So when you make design decisions to put somebody's back towards a door, understand that you are going to be activating their limbic system. And then lastly is your metabolic system. This is your adaptability layer. What I want you to understand, hopefully take away from this particular slide, is that all of these systems, think of them like a house of cards. If one domino falls, it doesn't matter if the other systems are supported. The entire human being as a collective entity is going to suffer and be unable to access that particular space, environment, room, whatever it is. Moving along. So how do we implement this? Well, they're really, it's a pathway, right? It's laid out here as like a linear path, but really this is sort of iterative. First and foremost, in pre-design, this is when we're thinking about, as Jill had mentioned, furniture being one of the most impactful components that human beings interact with on a day-to-day basis in their spaces. How many times are you sitting in a chair? Are you interacting with furniture? It doesn't matter. Usually they are brought in much later. Bringing them to the table earlier. Assemble a pre-designed team. Think outside the box. Psychologists, sociologists, human behaviorists, people that are specializing in accessibility, beyond your architects, design, engineers. So assemble that team early on, get those user groups in there. Then in the actual design, taking what is being done, so co-creation in pre-design, and then actually implementing that into the choices that you're making based on the human framework that we just high-level reviewed. Your contracts. If it's not written down, if it's not contractually there, no one is going to be held accountable, and you're not going to be able to measure it. So taking some of those human considerations, how the body is going to respond to these decisions, and putting those into your actual contracts as a way to measure success against what you're actually designing. And then lastly, and I actually think most importantly, is operationalizing it. Making sure your facilities team, your annual feasibility studies, your post-occupancy studies are actually measuring how people are using and utilizing the decisions, and doesn't need to adapt over time because humans adapt over time. Now you're up.
I'm so impressed. We were very prepared to pass through this. That's phenomenal. Every time we practiced, we blew through 20. All right, so when we take a moment, Kelly had just mentioned coming full circle, right? We went small with ADA to go large. So when you look at ADA and where it impacted the floor plate, you can see that it's a very small but very meaningful movement. And as we move forward, and what does that look like for furniture, for those of you that were here when that ADA was applied, it largely showed up in transaction tops. If everybody remembers when transaction counters were lowered, right? The spread between legs became wider. The different heights became accessible. So now we layer in what is the next, which is universal. Kelly mentioned we went wider now. As typical humans, we swing to one side and then pull back and go large, which was universal design. And you can see here where it shows up in the floor plate. So again, we've now layered on another principle that is a broad spectrum attribute throughout the floor plate. And where that shows up in furniture is something you still see today, right? Flexible layouts, we talk about that, right? How do you get more flexibility? But still not solving for the whole body, which is a lot of what, again, we'd heard earlier. Now, neuro-inclusive, when you look about this and you look at where we pull tight, we address a completely different dynamic within the space and sensory. These are a lot of the same places that we're talking about now. Focus rooms, for focus work coming back, the cafes, the lounges, where people want to be. However, when you look at some of those attributes, you can tell I work with this one often. When we get in those spaces where it's very loud, she does just fine. I do not. So again, you have to really look, are you solving for the whole self? Looking at some of those situations, on the left, we have a pod. They are throughout this space. For different individuals, how they react in those spaces, we fundamentally went through the 5 with a couple people. They react differently because of one of those systems being triggered. One of them having asthma. The air circulation in the pods, they feel like they're suffocating. So again, we just have to think broader as a group that are responsible for a lot of those decisions. Coming out of whole body, you can see where it is more of a holistic application, which is what we're all tasked with. We design and furnish spaces where people are. We have a big responsibility on our shoulders that as we learn this information, we just ask that you carry it forward, right? It's very important in how we show up and what we can do, whether it's biophilia. We look around, there are these lovely palm trees, right, with sound, they're baffles. How do you really incorporate those elements of humanness, which is what we all are. We are humans in a space, and incorporate that into what we specify.
So I love this quote up here. The more we understand people, the better we can design environments that support the whole self. And when I think about how we close this and what we would like for you to all take away, it's really comes down to kind of one sentence, is that people, human beings, do not experience space in silos. They don't experience space through an ADA lens. They don't experience space through, a universal design lens. They experience space in and through their bodies. And so as we move towards designing for the future workplace, making sure that we are considering the principles of whole body design, so predictability, things like that, but more importantly, understanding the human systems of the human body and taking those into consideration when we make our choices around what goes into a physical environment.
I'm so proud we nailed this.
Do we?
Amazing.
I had so much more, too.